this week. We continue our tour through the book Conjugial Love. And I've been doing this, as you recall, by looking at different stories that Swedenborg tells. And these stories illustrate points, right? That's the whole idea of these things. And we looked at the point of, golden age marriages and iron mixed with clay marriages and how, there's a difference, right? There's a difference. Well, this week, it's under a chapter titled Universal Matters Relating to Marriages. Nice and generic title there, right? Universal Matters. And this is an account he writes, and it seems to have nothing to do with marriage at first pass. But I think in this day and age, we can start to see how it does have to do with marriage. And it's a story where those of you who are familiar with Swedenborg stories will know there's this whole refrain, oh, how wise, oh, how learned. There's the first two accounts of this chapter are where Swedenborg's going through this, like a spiritual ancient Greece. And he's hearing these people claim, oh, how wise, oh, how learned. And he talks to some of these philosophers and stuff. And it's all pretty heavy and highfalutin theology. But then we get this third one as he's left those first two groups behind. And this is the story that he tells us. After this, one of the angels said, follow me to a place where they are crying out, oh, how wise! And he added, you will see human monstrosities. The faces and bodies you will see will be like those of a human being, and yet they are not human. So I said, are they animals then? No, they are not animals, but animal-like. For they are people who cannot see at all whether truth is true or not. And yet, whatever they wish, they can make to be true. Among us, people like that are called confirmers. We then followed the clamor and came to the place. And lo, we found a group of men surrounded by a crowd of people, and in the crowd some people of noble lineage. The men were confirming whatever the latter said and agreeing with them in such a manifest accord that when they heard it, they turned to each other and said, oh, how wise! However, the angel said to me, let us not go over to them, but instead call one of them out of the group. So he called one of them to us, and going aside with him, we talked about various matters. And he confirmed each point so thoroughly that they all appeared entirely true. We then asked him whether he could also confirm the opposite of these points. And he said that he could, just as well as he did with the previous ones. At which point he said openly from the heart, what is truth? Is there any truth in the nature of things other than what a person makes true? Say to me anything you please, and I will make it true. So I said, well, make this true. Make it so that faith is everything in the church. And he did so cleverly and skillfully that some learned bystanders looked on in admiration and applauded. I asked him next to make it true that charity is everything in the church, which he did. And afterward, that charity is nothing in the church. And he dressed up both propositions and arrayed them in such verisimilitudes that the bystanders looked at each other and said, isn't he wise? But I said, don't you know that to live rightly is charity and to believe rightly is faith? If anyone lives rightly, doesn't he also believe rightly, thus showing that faith is connected with charity, and charity with faith. Do you not see that this is true? He replied, I will make it true, and then I will see. And having done it, he said, now I see. But shortly he made the opposite of it to be true. And he said, well, I see this is also true. We chuckled at this and said, but aren't these contradictory statements? How can you see two contradictory conclusions as true? Nettled by our response, he replied, "You are wrong. Both conclusions are true, since truth is only what a person makes true." Standing nearby was someone who in the world had been an ambassador of the highest rank. He marveled at this and said, "I recognize that something of this sort goes on in the world, but still, you're insane. Make it true if you can, that light is darkness, and darkness light." To which he replied, "I will do it easily. What are light and darkness but conditions of the eye? Does not light turn to darkness when the eye comes out? Does light not turn to darkness when the eye comes in out of the bright sunshine, or when it gazes intently at the sun? Who does not know that the state of the eye then changes, and that light consequently appears as darkness? Conversely, when the condition of the eye recovers, the darkness appears as light. Does not an owl see the darkness of the night as the light of day, and the light of day as the darkness of night? Does it not see the sun itself as a dark and shadowy orb? If a person had an eye like an owl's, what he would call light, and what would he call darkness? What then is light but a condition of the eye? And if it is a condition of the eye, is not light darkness, and darkness light? Consequently, the one proposition is true, and the other is true. After that, the ambassador asked him to make it true that a raven is white and not black. To which he replied, "I will do this easily too. Take a needle or a razor and open up the feathers or quills of a raven. Are they not white inside? Then remove the feathers and the quills and look at the raven's skin. Is it not white? What is the blackness surrounding it but an opaqueness to light, which is hardly a basis on which to judge the raven's color? If you do not know that blackness is only an absence of light, ask experts in the science of optics and they will tell you. Or grind a piece of black stone or black glass into fine powder, and you will see that the powder is white." But the ambassador said, "Does a raven look black to the eye?" "Well, perhaps, but as a human being, are you willing to base what you think on an appearance? You may indeed speak in accordance with the appearance and say that a raven is black, but you cannot think it. As, for example, you may speak in accordance with the appearance and say the sun rises, travels, and sets, but as a human being, you cannot think it because the sun stands still and it is the earth that moves. It's the same with the raven. An appearance is only an appearance. Say what you will, a raven is totally and utterly white. It even turns white when it grows old, as I have observed." We then asked him to tell us honestly whether he was joking or whether he really believed that there was no truth but what a person makes true. He answered, "I swear that I believe it." After that, the ambassador asked him whether he could make it true that he was insane. To which he said, "Oh, I could, but I do not want to. Who is not insane?" This total confirmer was afterwards sent to some angels for them to examine and determine what sort of person he was. And after having examined him, they said he possessed not even a grain of understanding, because everything that exists above the level of reason in him was closed up, and only that which is below the level of reason was open. Above the level of reason, they said, is the light of heaven, and below the level of reason is the light of nature. And the light of nature is such that it can confirm whatever it pleases. However, if the light of heaven does not flow in the light of nature, a person does not see whether any truth is true, so neither whether any falsity is false. An ability to see both what is true and what is false results from the presence of light from heaven in the light of nature. And the light of heaven comes from God of heaven, who is the Lord. This total confirmer is therefore neither human or animal, but animal-like. I asked the angel with me about the fate of people like that, and whether it was possible for them to be among the living, since a person has life from the light of heaven, and from it comes his intellect. And the angel said that when people of this sort are by themselves, they are incapable of thought, and so have nothing to say, but stand as mute as machines, as though in a deep sleep. But as soon as something catches their ears, they awaken. He added that people become like that who are inmostly evil. The light of heaven cannot flow into them from above, he said, but only some spiritual element through the world, from which they have an ability to confirm. After he had said this, I heard the voice of one of the angels who had examined the man, calling me to saying, "From what you have heard, draw an overall conclusion." So I drew the following conclusion. An ability to confirm whatever one pleases is not the mark of an intelligent person. Rather, the mark of an intelligent person is to be able to see that truth is true and falsity is false, and to confirm that. It's a real skill. Can you see that truth is true and falsity is false? It doesn't seem like it should be that hard, right? But there are people out there who are really good at arguing that false things are true. You know? And the Word teaches us this, right? There are people who use the Word to teach that, as the example was, that faith is the most important thing. In the world of marriage these days, we have people trying to teach us that false things are true. We have people trying to teach us that men can marry men. We have the crazy idea that men can give birth out there in the world these days. Absolutely bonkers. But this is what the world passes as wisdom. The ability to confirm whatever you want. That is not wisdom. Wisdom is being able to see what is actually true. And it's kind of crazy to think how this relates to marriage, but there we have it. People saying that women can marry women, that guys can be girls, and vice versa. It's a crazy mixed up world. And what's going on here is people are open, as it says, their light from heaven is not open, right? They're rationalizing from the material world and saying, oh, well, what are we? We are all just chemistry sets. We're just animals that can happen to speak. Well, no, actually. The writings in the spirituality are very clear that what makes us different from animals is that we have a rational side. We have the ability to think. We have the ability to raise ourselves higher. This is true in normal life, but it's also true with marriages too. And that we should treat our marriages like something spiritual, not like something natural. Marriage isn't just a social contract. You know, we talked a little bit in our class on Thursday that the marriage, once you've had that ceremony, that commitment and that pronouncement and that covenant, that the marriage is something real and cannot be undone. It's more than just two people living in a house together. Something has really connected them. You can't see that if you don't believe there's this higher light from heaven. You can't see that if you're in this animal-like state. But you can if you open yourself to the teachings of the Lord and you open yourself up to believing that, you know what? Some things are actually true. And it's a great way to see it. When somebody's arguing with you and you don't quite see their argument, you can follow along. You think, oh, this is true. I don't get it. They're making some sense. I can follow their logic somewhat. Sometimes the only defense you have is to say is, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but this is true, not that. And you may not be able to articulate your point at that moment to say why you believe this is true. You just know it. But that's wisdom. I know this is true. I see this is true. That raven is black. That raven is black. And boys are boys and girls are girls. And men can't give babies and women can. This isn't that hard. Isn't that hard? But you got to be careful because there are a lot of messages out there these days telling us things are not as simple as that. When in fact the Lord says, yes, they are. Amen.